My question, my what-if question, as you can see up there, is what if space were our playground? And there's the nationalistic element in the thing, America's playground, but just roll with it. What I'm going to talk about is tied intricately to a literary genre that I'm personally very fond of called alternate history. It's also known as counterfactual history or uchronia. And alternate history is a timeline where things happen differently from what happened here. For instance, if the Nazis had won World War II, if the South had won the Civil War, etc. So, what if space had been our playground? In order to have a successful alternate history, we have to go back and look at real history. And so I'm going to take you back to the 20th of July, 1969, and ask, whither Apollo? On this date, humans first walked on another celestial body. If you're a moon hoaxer, you can leave if you don't like that, you know. But anyway, imagine that that was a real thing and that people actually walked on the moon. If you're a person who plans this event, you're elated, but you're also filled with a sense of deflation. What do we do now? How do we top this? NASA's answer was what they called the Apollo Applications Program, which included a bunch of fun stuff, one of which you can see above me. This is an Apollo hardware-derived space station that would have been launched on a Saturn V. You can see the little Apollo command and service module docked to the top. Other possibilities included continued lunar exploration using Apollo-derived hardware, pressurized rovers, and trucks that would land heavy equipment on the moon, leading to a lunar base. This is all period concept art, by the way, made by NASA's own artists. My personal favorite and the most audacious plan to come out of the Apollo Applications Program was a manned Mars and Venus flyby. Same mission, 3 men, 3 years in deep space. Didn't happen. You may have noticed. It's not in the history books. The reason is Congress. Well, sort of. In 1967, NASA suffered its first really major disaster, which was the Apollo 1 fire. It killed 3 astronauts. They never made it into space on their mission, killed them on the launch pad during a test. It was supposed to be routine, no danger, but it killed them anyway. And Congress wanted to punish NASA for being incompetent? Who knows? But Congress wanted to punish NASA anyway. And so they couldn't cut the Apollo budget because that might delay the first moon landing until after 1970, and that would desecrate the grave and the memory of JFK. So instead, they cut the budget for what comes after Apollo. So the space station you see up there is Skylab, which is the only thing we got out of Apollo applications. Pretty cool, but nevertheless not a manned flyby of Mars and Venus. So you might say, if you're an organization, or if you're an entrepreneur, as we've been saying, you might say at this point, well, maybe we should scale back our ambitions. Maybe we should be a little bit more practical and reasonable. NASA didn't do that. NASA said, why not bigger? Let's go into deeper space. And so this part is the story of the integrated program plan, which is, I think, the most fun, not happening thing in NASA's history. The integrated program plan came about because in 1969, NASA got a new administrator named Thomas Paine. Mr. Paine had no political expertise, but he was a space true believer. He felt in his bones that humans were supposed to be up there gallivanting around, especially Americans were. And his pet project in space was a big space station. Now, what you see above is a plan that he encouraged that would be a 12-man nuclear-powered space station, potentially expandable to more people. For context, by 1975, by the way, which is 7 years after integrated program plan begins. For context, the current International Space Station, which is the largest space station that's ever been built, cost around $120 billion from 16 different countries, maybe 18, I think it's 16. Fact check me, somebody. Took about 20 years to put into space, not 7, and only has a crew of 6, not 12. So this was a little optimistic. But wait, there's more. This very, very large space station would serve as the basis, by 1980, for a space base, which would have a crew of between 50 and 100. You see the little triangle at the top? That's a space shuttle. Space shuttles are huge. Also, this thing has 3 nuclear reactors. They were big into nukes. I don't know why. Anyway, both of these concepts would be serviced by a space shuttle, but not the one we got. The one NASA wanted was fully reusable. It's the one you see above. Had 2 stages, both of them manned. And they would have been the largest reusable vehicles ever built. Obviously, we didn't get this. As a side note, might have been good if we had, because both of the shuttle disasters were caused by the makeshift booster system that NASA had to use in place of the reusable booster. So, may have been safer. The space shuttle also would service spaceborne shuttles, which they called tugs. Tugs were essentially flying propellant tanks with engines attached, and you could attach various, things, as you can see in the thing. These could potentially go all the way to the moon. The integrated program plan called for a lunar orbit space station, which would cooperate with a lunar surface base, or possibly several. You can see some tugs flying up there. All of which would culminate in manned Mars missions by 1983. That's 15 years after this plan is being made. So why didn't it happen? Well, I imagine you can guess. That's a picture of President Nixon playing with an early model of the space shuttle we got. President Nixon was presented this enormous, grandiose plan by Administrator Payne, and Payne didn't provide him any alternative. He didn't say you can have plan A, B, and C. He said you can have plan A. Nixon rejected that, and in the vacuum that followed, Nixon simply provided the space plan that fulfilled his political objectives. The space shuttle was built in California. Nixon needed to win California in 1972. And as I mentioned, Payne was politically inept. But we're asking, what if? So here's the alternate history. What if Payne had understood that the nation couldn't possibly commit a budget several times Apollo's for the next 20 years, and instead he proposed a fully reusable 2-stage shuttle, a single space station, a few tugs maybe, humans going back to the moon by 1990, which is 20-odd years in the future, and humans landing on Mars by 2000. Nixon, in fact, endorsed a manned landing on Mars by 2000, but of course the date was so far in the future that it was politically useless. Spread over 30 years, the cost of this isn't too bad. So it's possible Nixon would have approved it. More important, since it didn't happen, is this too big for you? Does this feel uncomfortably large? The integrated program plan was huge and probably would never have come to pass. But consider, even the full plan would only have opened the inner solar system for human exploration, which is a drop in the bucket compared to other star systems and the galaxy as a whole. Maybe, since Apollo ended, we've become used to thinking small in space. We eventually got a space station. We had the space shuttle for a while. Kind of evolutionary stuff rather than revolutionary. So what I want to ask is, what if we think big again? What if space became our playground? Thank you.